Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more Greek mythology. Today, we'll be getting into the next chapter of the royal house of Thebes. So, yeah, another family line to look at here. Some famous names. But, let's go ahead and jump into this. The royal house of Thebes. The story of the Theban family rivals that of the house of Atreus in fame, and for the same reason. Just as the greatest plays of Aeschylus in the 5th century are about Atreus' descendants, so the greatest plays of his contemporary Sophocles are about Oedipus and his children. Cadmus and his children. The tale of Cadmus and his daughters is only a prologue to the greater story. It was popular in classical days, and several writers told it in whole or part. I have preferred the account of Apollodorus, who wrote in the 1st or 2nd century AD. He tells it simply and clearly. When Europa was carried away by the bull, her father sent her brothers to search for her, bidding them not to return until they had found her. One of them, Cadmus, instead of looking vaguely here and there, went very sensibly to Delphi to ask Apollo where she was. The god told him not to trouble further about her, or his father's determination not to receive him without her, but to found a city of his own. He would come upon a heifer when he left Delphi, Apollo said. He was to follow her and build his city at the spot where she lay down to rest. In this way, Thebes was founded, and the country around about got the name of the heifer's land, Boeotia. First, however, Cadmus had to fight and kill a terrible dragon which guarded a spring nearby and slew all his companions when they went to get water. Alone he could never have built the city, but when the dragon was dead, Athena appeared to him and told him to sow the earth with the dragon's teeth. He obeyed with no idea what was to happen, but to his terror saw armed men spring up from the furrows. However, they paid no attention to him, but turned upon each other until they were all killed, except 5 whom Cadmus induced to become his helpers. With the aid of the 5, Cadmus made Thebes a glorious city, and ruled over it in great prosperity and with great wisdom. Herodotus says that he introduced the alphabet into Greece. His wife was Harmonia, the daughter of Ares and Aphrodite. The gods graced their marriage with their presence, and Aphrodite gave Harmonia a wondrous necklace which had been made by Hephaestus, the workman of Olympus, but which for all its divine origin was to bring disaster in a later generation. They had 4 daughters and 1 son, and they learned through their children that the wind of the gods' favor never blows steadily for long. All of their daughters was visited by great misfortunes. One of them was Semele, the mother of Dionysus, who perished before the unveiled glory of Zeus. Ino was another. She was the wicked stepmother of Phrixus, the boy who was saved from death by the ram of the golden fleece. Her husband was struck with madness and killed their son Melicertes. With his dead body in her arms, she leaped into the sea. The gods saved them both, however. She became a sea goddess, the one who saved Odysseus from drowning when his raft was shattered, and her son became a sea god. In the Odyssey, she is still called Ino, but later her name was changed to Leucothea, and her son was called Palaemon. Like her sister Semele, she was fortunate in the end. The two others were not. Both suffered through their sons. Agave was the most wretched of all mothers, driven mad by Dionysus so that she believed her son Pentheus was a lion and killed him with her own hands. Autonoe's son was Actaeon, a great hunter. Autonoe was less wretched than Agave in that she did not herself kill her son, but she had to endure his dying a terrible death in the strength of his young manhood, a death too completely undeserved. He had done no wrong. He was out hunting and, hot and thirsty, entered a grotto where a little stream widened into a pool. He wanted only to cool himself in the crystal water, but all unknowing he had chanced upon the favorite bathing place of Artemis. And at the very moment when the goddess had let fall her garments and stood in her naked beauty on the water's edge, the offended divinity gave not a thought to whether the youth had purposely insulted her or had come there in all innocence. She flung into his face drops from her wet hand, and as they fell upon him, he was changed into a stag, not only outwardly. His heart became a deer's heart, and he who had never known fear before was afraid and fled. His dogs saw him running and chased him. Even his agony of terror could not make him swift enough to outstrip the keen-scented pack. They fell upon him, his own faithful hounds, and killed him. Thus great sorrows for their children and grandchildren came upon Cadmus and Harmonia in old age after great prosperity. After Pentheus died, they fled from Thebes, as if trying to flee also from misfortune. But misfortune followed them. When they reached far distant Illyria, the gods changed them into serpents, not as a punishment, for they had done no wrong. Their fate, indeed, was a proof that suffering was not a punishment for wrongdoing. The innocent suffered as often as the guilty. Of all that unfortunate race, no one was more innocent of the wrongdoing than Oedipus, a great-great-grandson of Cadmus, and no one suffered so greatly. Oedipus. I have taken this story entirely from Sophocles' plays of that name, except for the riddle of the Sphinx, which Sophocles merely alludes to. It is given by many writers, always in substantially the same form. King Laius of Thebes was the third in descent from Cadmus. He married a distant cousin, Jocasta. With their reign, Apollo's oracle at Delphi began to play a leading part in the family's fortunes. Apollo was the god of truth. Whatever the priestess at Delphi would say said would happen infallibly came to pass. To attempt to act in such a way that the prophecy would be made void was as futile as to set oneself against the decrees of fate. Nevertheless, when the oracle warned Laius that he would die at the hands of his son, he determined that this should not be. When the child was born, he bound his feet together and had it exposed on a lonely mountain where it must soon die. He felt no more fear. He was sure that on this point he could foretell the future better than the god. His folly was not brought home to him. He was killed indeed, but he thought the man who attacked him was a stranger. He never knew that in his death he had proved Apollo's truth. When he died, he was away from home, and many years had passed since the baby had been left on the mountain. It was reported that a band of robbers had slain him together with his attendants, all except one who brought the news home. The matter was not carefully investigated because Thebes was in sore straits at the time. The country around was beset by a frightful monster, the Sphinx, a creature shaped like a winged lion, but with the breast and face of a woman. She lay in wait for the wayfarers along the roads to the city, and whomever she sees, she put a riddle to, telling him if he could not answer it, if he could answer it, she would let him go. No one could, and the horrible creature devoured man after man until the city was in a state of siege. The 7 great gates, which were the Thebans' pride, remained closed, and famine drew near to the citizens. So matters stood when there came into the stricken country a stranger, a man of great courage and great intelligence, whose name was Oedipus. He had left his home in Corinth, where he was held to be the son of the king Polybus. And the reason for his self-exile was another Delphic oracle. Apollo had declared that he was fated to kill his father. He too, like Laius, thought to make it impossible for the oracle to come true. He resolved never to see Polybus again. In his lonely wanderings, he came up into the country around Thebes, and he heard what was happening there. He was a homeless, friendless man to whom life meant little, and he determined to seek the Sphinx out and try to solve the riddle. "What creature," the Sphinx asked him, "goes on 4 feet in the morning, on 2 at noonday, on 3 in the evening?" "Man," answered Oedipus. "In childhood he creeps on hands and feet. In manhood he walks erect. In old age he helps himself with a staff." It was the right answer. The Sphinx, inexplicably but most fortunately, killed herself. The Thebans were saved. Oedipus gained all and more than he had left. The grateful citizens made him their king, and he married the dead king's wife, Jocasta. For many years they lived happily. It seemed that in this case Apollo's words had been proved to be false. But when their two sons had grown to manhood, Thebes was visited by a terrible plague. A blight fell upon everything. Not only were men dying throughout the country, the flocks and herds and the fruits of their field were blasted as well. Those who were spared death by disease faced death by famine. No one suffered more than Oedipus. He regarded himself as the father of the whole state. The people in it were his children. The misery of each one was his too. He dispatched Jocasta's brother Creon to Delphi to implore the gods' help. Creon returned with good news. Apollo had declared that the plague would be stayed upon one condition. Whoever had murdered King Laius must be punished. Oedipus was enormously relieved. Surely the men of the man could be, or the men, or the man could be found even after all these years, and they would know well how to punish him. He proclaimed to the people gathered to hear the message Creon brought back. Let no one of this land give shelter to him. Bar him from your homes, as one defiled, companioned by pollution. And solemnly I pray, may he who killed wear out his life in evil, being evil. Oedipus took the matter in hand with energy. He sent for Tiresias, the old blind prophet, the most revered of Thebans. Had he any means of finding out, he asked him, who the guilty were? To his amazement and indignation, the seer at first refused to answer. For the love of God, Oedipus implored him, if you have knowledge. Fools, Tiresias said. Fools, all of you. I will not answer. But when Oedipus went so far as to accuse him of keeping silence because he had himself taken part in the murder, the prophet in his turn was angered, and the words he had meant never to speak fell heavily from his lips. You are yourself the murderer you seek. To Oedipus, the old man's mind was wandering. What he said was sheer madness. He ordered him out of his sight and never again to appear before him. Jocasta, too, treated the assertion with scorn. Neither prophets nor oracles have any knowledge, she said. She told her husband how the priestess at Delphi had prophesied that Laius should die at the hand of his son, and how he and she together had seen to it that this should not happen by having the child killed. And Laius was murdered by robbers, where three roads met on the way to Delphi, she concluded triumphantly. Oedipus gave her a strange look. When did this happen? He asked slowly. Just before you came to Thebes, she said. How many were with him? Oedipus asked. They were 5 in all, Jocasta spoke quickly, all killed but one. I must see that man, he told her. Send for him. I will, she said, at once. But I have a right to know what is in your mind. You shall know all that I know, he answered. I went to Delphi just before I came here because a man had flung it in my face that I was not the son of Polybus. I went to ask the god. He did not answer me, but he told me horrible things, that I should kill my father, marry my mother, and have children men would shudder to look upon. I never went back to Corinth. On my way from Delphi, at the place where the three roads met, I came upon a man with 4 attendants. He tried to force me from the path. He struck me with his stick. Angered, I fell upon them and I killed them. Could it be the leader was Laius? The one man left alive brought back a tale of robbers, Jocasta said. Laius was killed by robbers, not by his son, the poor innocent who died upon the mountain. As they talked, a further proof seemed given them that Apollo could speak falsely. A messenger came from Corinth to announce to Oedipus the death of Polybus. O oracle of the god, Jocasta cried, where are you now? The man died, but not by his son's hand. The messenger smiled wisely. Did the fear of killing your father drive you from Corinth? He asked. Ah, king, you were in error. You never had reason to fear, for you were not the son of Polybus. He brought you up as though you were his, but he took you from my hands. Where did you get me? Oedipus said. Who were my mother and father? I know nothing of them, the messenger said. A wandering shepherd gave you to me, a servant of Laius. Jocasta turned white. A look of horror was on her face. Why waste a thought upon what such a fellow says? She cried. Nothing else can matter. She spoke hurriedly, yet fiercely. Oedipus could not understand her. My birth does not matter, he asked. For God's sake, go no further, she said. My misery is enough. She broke away and rushed into the palace. At that moment, an old man entered. He was the messenger. He and the messenger eyed each other curiously. The very man, O king, the messenger cried. The shepherd who gave you to me. And you, Oedipus asked the other, do you know him as he knows you? The old man did not answer, but the messenger insisted. You must remember, you gave me once a little child you had found, and the king here is that child. Curse you, the other muttered. Hold your tongue. What? Oedipus said angrily. You would conspire with him to hide from me what I desire to know? There are ways, be sure, to make you speak. The old man wailed. Oh, do not hurt me. I did give him the child, but do not ask more, master, for the love of God. If I have to order you a second time to tell me where you got him, you are lost, Oedipus said. Ask your lady, the old man cried. She can tell you best. She gave him to you? Asked Oedipus. Oh, yes, the other groaned. I was to kill the child. There was a prophecy. A prophecy, Oedipus repeated, that he would kill his father. Yes, the old man whispered. A cry of agony came from the king. At last he understood. All true. Now shall my light be changed to darkness. I am accursed. He had murdered his father. He had married his father's wife, his own mother. There was no help for him, for her, for their children. All were accursed. Within the palace, Oedipus wildly sought for his wife that was his mother. He found her in her chamber. She was dead. When the truth broke upon her, she had killed herself. Standing beside her, he too turned his hand against himself, but not to end his life. He changed his light to darkness. He put out his eyes. The black world of blindness was a refuge. Better to be there than to see with strange, shamed eyes the old world that had been so bright. Let's see how long that is. I think we'll go ahead and end it here, because the next story, it's not long, but it's long enough. So, yeah. So we should finish this chapter in the next episode. But yeah, the story of Thebes founding, and then Oedipus, or as I knew the story when I read it in school, Oedipus Rex. I can't remember if it was community college or high school I read it, but I remember having to read it. It's, yeah. The poor guy is put through so much. He's, yeah. Even though there was the attempt to twist fate, to twist the prophecy so they can be escaped, it still didn't help. Yeah. It was it was an unfortunate existence. Yeah. So he accidentally kills his father, ends up, saving Thebes from the Sphinx, so they make him king, and thus ends up marrying his mother, who was the queen. Yeah. It's, if you believe that way of thinking, that it's fate will happen regardless of what you do, then that's kind of the basis of the story. But yeah, as always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.